Now, I think we're in business. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for bearing with me for a couple extra seconds here as we navigate the latest changes on Facebook so that we can connect with our Facebook Live audience as well. My name is Shannon Emerick. I know you're often used to seeing Carmen Martinez here. She is on a well-deserved break today before she gears up for the final push for our great NAMI walk, which is coming up on May 22nd. So I am honored to be here today. I'm the communications coordinator for NAMI Greater Houston, and I'm also a professional actor. So when I was thinking about today's Tuesday talk, my theater background and acting background came into play. And this happens to be Shakespeare's birthday week. And what I learned is that Shakespeare's birthday is not only great because it's his birthday, it's also our own Dr. Neal's birthday. April 23rd, which is this Friday, is our executive director, Dr. Neal Sarahan's birthday. And so I just love that coincidence. So since it is Shakespeare's birthday week, I thought we could do something kind of different on today's Tuesday talk. I am a huge Shakespeare fan, and I know a lot of people are not sure about Shakespeare, but he was born 457 years ago, and we're still doing his plays. And so that should tell us something about what he gave to the world, which is an incredible gift of humanity in his writing. The characters that he captured and put on paper that are brought to life in so many different ways are so remarkably human that 457 years later, we are still relating to them massively. And it occurred to me that if Shakespeare captures that much humanity, then he must also capture some aspects of mental health in what he does. So I started digging a bit into it. And of course, Hamlet came to mind. We'll talk more about that. Don't worry if you don't know Hamlet. And some other of Shakespeare's plays. And the reality is there's probably an awful lot there that I won't even get to today, but that scholars could do much better than I do. Unfortunately, John Felch, our good friend of mine and special guest, is not with us today. I do hope he's okay. He was gonna join us, and maybe he'll pop on later, but that will not stop our discussion. So what I thought we would do today is just talk about, I'm gonna read you, I'm gonna hopefully give you more than just a cold reading. Of course, for those of you who don't know Hamlet, Hamlet is about a young man who is in deep grief over the loss of his father. Then he comes to find that he's also in deep grief over the fact that his mother has remarried very quickly after her husband's death. And not only very quickly, but she has remarried his uncle, her husband's brother. So he's a little undone by this. And Hamlet, depending on how you play it, could either be late teens into his 20s. So it's a pretty vulnerable time in life where people's brains are still developing at that age. Then he comes to learn that his father didn't just die, he was poisoned, so he was murdered. And on top of that, he was poisoned by his uncle. So the grief is compounded with anger, is compounded with disbelief, is compounded with great sorrow, and is very likely also compounded with depression. Throughout the play, many people, many other characters dismiss him as mad, as they would have said back then. They dismiss him as crazy in the full stigma type of the word that we certainly do not ascribe to here at NAMI, and hope that you don't either. The reality, and he knows this, he knows that this is what people think of him. And so he acts a little off kilter for a good portion of the play, trying to kind of throw them off. But at the root of it, I think, is genuine depression and genuine deep grief, and in probably the most famous monologue perhaps in the history of theater, to be or not to be, that is the question. He is literally saying, is it better to live or is it better to die? So I should give a little bit of a suicide trigger warning here as we delve into this a little bit more. But people riff off of To Be or Not to Be all the time. It's tossed off. But when you really break it down and look at it, what you see is this young man who is grieving for his father. He's frankly grieving for his mother too, and all that she is going through, the choices she has made, and then, you know, he has to figure out what to do about his uncle. So what I wanted to do is take a few minutes and read to you, kind of go with you a bit through To Be or Not to Be, and let you hear some of this incredible language that I have nothing to do with except that I'm the vessel today. And then we might spend a little time talking about what those choices are. I not too long ago had a chance to be part of a workshop where someone spoke of suicide, really talking about how we need to change the way we view suicide. And I am not a licensed therapist, anything like that. But I was fascinated with the notion that it's not so much that someone who's considering suicide wants to die, it's that they don't know how to live and they can't see another choice, which I think is very interesting than actively wanting to die. So this is all very heavy, but what it ends up with is great humanity. And I will go ahead and give you the spoiler that Hamlet does not commit suicide. And so let me just do that, and then I'm going to ask Dr. Neal to come on after this and maybe explore this a little bit with me as we dive into it. So I know we've got a couple more people joining. I'm going to keep the bell sound on, not to distract you, but to distract me so that I can hit admit if they come in. Neal, I might also I think I'll make you a co-host so that you can maybe help me with that too. Let's see, make co-host. There we go. Okay, so let's have a little bit here of To Be or Not to Be. This is, of course, from Hamlet by William Shakespeare, whose birthday we are celebrating this week, and exploring mental health here on Tuesday Talks with NAMI Greater Houston.
Shannon, you made Merrily Mason the co-host, but not Neal, and so I want to celebrate Merrily more and the beautiful cardinal that's on her photo here.
Isn't it though?
And you can add me too.
I just did, and I lovingly demoted Merrily. I think you must have been right
Oh
next
my
to each other.
gosh, don't do that.
But Merrily, do not take it personally. I didn't want you to have that responsibility.
We're all hosts. We're all guests.
There we are, and everyone is welcome. Hi, Netta. We're glad you're here today. Okay, so let's do a little To Be or Not to Be. To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep no more, and by a sleep to say we end the heartache and the thousand natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis a consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. Aye, there's the rub. For in that sleep of death, what dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. There's the respect that makes calamity of so long life. For who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of disprized love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes, when he himself might make his quietus with a bare bodkin? Who would fardels bear to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have, than fly to others that we know not of. Thus conscience doth make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought. And enterprises of great pith and moment with this regard, their currents turn awry, and lose the name of action. So just to give an overview, and then we're going to go back and look at some specific pieces of this. I think I was struck reading it this time, and I've known it since I was in high school. He's so practical. He's sitting here saying, who would want to live when all of these wrongs are happening? And I think, boy, are we living it, without getting too emotional and certainly political, not too political, but boy, are we living in some rough times. And we could have a list just like he does. We could have a list just like he does. All of the things, who would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of disprized love, the law's delay, the insolence of office. I mean, he has a whole list of things that are really, really hard to live with. And he is saying, why would we choose that when there's another way? Except that it's not quite that simple. Of course, we at NAMI see lots and lots of reasons for choosing life, but I have to chuckle a little at Hamlet's practicality, because for him, the unknowing, not knowing what's going to happen to us after we die, is part of what keeps him alive. He's saying, darn it, we don't know. It's the undiscovered country. That's that marvelous phrase that sometimes is quoted. Life after death is the undiscovered country. We don't know what's going to happen there. And if we truly get to sleep when we die, which at first sounds like peace, to him, it sounds like peace just to sleep. And then he realizes, but what if I dream when I sleep in death? And then he realizes, I have no idea what those dreams would be like. So in the end, he sort of fusses at himself for he calls himself a coward. I would certainly not do that. But he chooses life. He chooses to face what is here for one more day, or however many more days. But the humanity, as always with Shakespeare, is what comes through. And the notion of, we all get what it is to be tired, whether that's physically, whether that's emotionally, whether that's mentally. And I think probably the whole world is pretty tired right now, if for no other reason than what we've just been through and are still in the midst of with this global pandemic. Then you add on top of it the, zillion other things that are happening in terms of social justice and in terms of people's rights and what is fair. And it's a lot. Living is a lot. And I love the notion that 457 years ago, okay, so he didn't do it the day he was born, but he did it pretty early in his life. 440 something years ago, this notion of mental health was something very real, just as it is for us today. And it's not always cut and dry. And I try, Neal, as we've explored recently, I've been fascinated to really further explore the notion that we here at NAMI are here to help with everything from low-level crisis to medium crisis. We are here to try to help people not get to the severe crisis level. And part of me this is silly, but it also makes me cry. Part of me so wishes that Hamlet could have called our warm line, but we see that in Shakespeare. And so then I want to show you a reflection from another character in the play about Hamlet. But before we move on to that, Dr. Neal, is there anything you would like to jump in with right now? If not, that's fine. I'll go on to Ophelia, but I didn't want to rush it if you had anything to add. Hello, you're waving. Anything you want to add, or we're good?
I was just wondering about our audience. Do we resonate, or any of us Hamlet?
Mm.
You know, that's I think one of the that about Hamlet in the play is really how very alone he is,
Mm-hmm.
how he doesn't know how to navigate or who to trust or how to make sense of it. I was just wondering if anybody feels like they're Hamlet in our audience. You could put it in the chat, or you could, you know, the weight of your burdens.
I'll volunteer that I have.
Yeah.
Not just during COVID. At an earlier point in my life, I was not suicidal, and I don't even think it was suicidal ideation, but I remember very clearly thinking and articulating to my father, it's not that I want to die, but I don't know how to live. And I don't think I'll ever forget hitting that spot. I am very grateful never to have hit that spot again. And I never thought of that in terms of a Hamlet moment, but I suppose you could say that it is. Does anybody else want to? It's okay if you don't.
I'd like to share.
Okay, please.
Go ahead.
I don't know why the dog wants to share right now.
Yeah.
That's okay.
The dog says, "Let me tell you a few stories."
That's right.
So in 2018, I had my Hamlet moment, and I took my own life. I was out for a long time. They told my family there was no brain activity. I was out for more than a week before my sister pulled the plug. And I woke up angry because they were planning my funeral, and I said I didn't want one. Since that time, I can tell you, I didn't dream that I remember during that time, but I did wake up with a sense of purpose. Yeah. And that sense of purpose keeps me from going back there, even though it gets hard a lot. But with like Hamlet, I have no support. I have no family. I am alone right now. I am. That's it. That's all I got to say.
Oh, thank you. And you are, we're here to say that you are not alone, and that you are that your purpose joins you to life. You're with your purpose, certainly. Anybody else? If they're Hamlet moments, you can just, for the most part, you could turn off your mute, and we can have a little more of a conversation. And if it goes crazy, then we'll say turn it off. But I'd rather that invite you to turn off your mute buttons, and we're all together and hearing each other and being with each other.
Oh, like
Hamlet moments. Or yeah.
Who went? My mind was, it's like an echo, but by the way, thank you, Nat, for sharing that. You're so strong. I had a Hamlet moment not too long ago. It was 2019. I felt alone. I really wasn't suicidal. I didn't want to die, but I just didn't know how to live, especially with the case I was doing, trying to figure out what happened to me in my past. I definitely felt alone. And bringing justice for me from I was raped when I was a child, and going back at the age of 30 to face those two men who raped me that was supposed to protect me and was close to me, it was hard. And I felt like my family turned on me, friends didn't understand. So yeah, I was in between to be or not to be.
Yeah.
But since then, I definitely got my justice. They're serving time, and I'm just trying to live on this path. So,
Mhm.
Wow.
Doesn't Hamlet also search for justice?
Oh, he absolutely searches for justice. Actually, he takes matters into his own hands, which would not be the right thing. I don't advocate for that. But back then, it wasn't quite the same as today. But he does, and he it is important to him to. I love that you said that, and I'm even more deeply moved that you shared that. And like with Ned, I hope you realize how strong you are. Not only that you just shared something very personal, but that you're here and you made it through all of that. And that even if there are times when you feel like you're back in the midst of that, that doesn't mean you've lost any ground. But that's when you can reach out to organizations like us here at NAMI.
did Shakespeare get justice?
Sort of. The long and short of it is that at the end of Hamlet, everyone dies. So it is in fact a grand tragedy in the true sense of the word. There is a very bloody and poison-filled fight scene, sword fight at the end of it. And it doesn't go exactly as planned. So he gets justice, but then he doesn't get to live on in that new life the way you have. So it is a rough play emotionally. I also think it's one of the most extraordinary things ever created. And
justice is also like a big category too. It's different kind of justice.
Okay,
Yes.
if you can hear me, then I wanted to open space for anybody else that wanted to share their Shakespeare, their Hamlet moment, and then we can get to the next part.
Well, I definitely want to continue hearing Miss Tasha's story, because that is real vindication.
Yeah, that's Kren, our friend maybe in California. Are you there, Kren?
Hey, everybody. My name is Crenshaw. You can call me Kren. I actually am a NAMI for Life member. I actually was part of NAMI Greater Houston. I've been living in Dallas for the last 6 months. And since my apartment lease is going to be going up next month, I might be moving back to Houston next month. So, yeah.
Well, come on. We're here for you when you get here. We're here for you.
Yes, definitely.
So my story has been interesting. I definitely have had kind of some Hamlet moments for sure. I grew up having a narcissistic father. So my childhood, it was literally Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde with him. I mean, it was like he could be the nicest, mellow, calm, cool guy. And then if you say something he didn't like, or if you make a facial expression he didn't like, or you do something that he didn't like, or say something that he misinterpreted, his whole personality just became mean and controlling and verbally abusive. So growing up for me, that really created confusion for me, and also a little bit of distrust when it came to other men, because I didn't have that healthy father figure growing up. And also for me, it caused a lot of I would kind of say subconsciously covert narcissist traits that I exhibited myself. I'm someone who, I'm actually an aspiring actor, and it's something that I've dreamed about since I was 10 years old and made my debut as the Cowardly Lion and Wizard of Oz. And I pursued it when I was a teenager, and I got taken advantage of, and it kind of left a permanently bad taste in my mother's mouth, but I never wanted to give up on it. But my self-esteem has just always been low. Because I've always compared myself to the Denzel Washingtons and the Shamar Moores and, the men out there. So I'm like, I don't look like them. I don't have a six pack like them, So it's always caused me to be insecure. And in 2013, 2014, ironically, I want to say probably a year and a half before I officially joined NAMI, I was definitely having a Hamlet moment. I was just kind of really having suicidal thoughts because I felt like I'm not going to ever become I'm not going to ever have any kind of success as far as Hollywood goes. And then I never really thought about what my plan B backup plan was going to be career-wise if it didn't work out. So I just I allowed the circumstances that I was going through at the time to kind of cause me to want to throw in the towel altogether. And then in early 2016, I found NAMI, and I'm like, oh, thank God. So it actually, really has been a blessing being a member of this group. It'll be 5.5 years this August that I've been a member of NAMI. And I just wish I had known about you guys January 1st of 2000, because I would have joined you guys right before I started high school.
I wish I would have known too. I just found out like 2 months ago about NAMI.
Yeah. So
But you're here now, and we're so glad.
Yes, I am glad too. Hope you're doing well. Everybody's been doing well. This has been an interesting year per se. Just the way that it's starting off, it's already starting off a little crazier than last year did because of the snowstorm and these now feels like once a week shootings that are taking place and the injustice that's going on. And, this George Floyd trial that I just wanted to be over with already. So, yeah.
Well,
yeah. The toils and trails of what is Shakespeare's line of the toils of life. Shannon, you wanted to introduce us to Ophelia.
I do. The slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. Which
there you go.
all of those rough things that Kren is just talking about right now. Kren, I think you joined us a little later. I don't know if you heard me say that I'm a professional actor, and I can hear it in your voice that you've got the bug, and you have a beautiful voice. And I love that. I just have to pause before we go on here. Thank you, Neal, for not only opening this space for sharing, but I believe deeply in the power of storytelling. I believe that everybody has a story, and everybody has a story that deserves to be heard. And so when we can come together like this and share stories, to me, that is huge personally. It's also a big part of why I'm an actor, because in the theater, of course, what we get to do are share stories. And so thank you all for doing that. Neal, you wanted to add something?
Notice had raised.
Oh, you're cutting in and out.
Noticing that Net.
Oh, Net has her hand raised?
Yeah. And I want to encourage her, if she'd like to talk, to flip off of unmute, and then check on her dog, and then
it's not my dog. I have a cat. Dog's next door.
All right.
What I wanted to say, it's funny, I have a theater background as well. Way back in high school, I chose a different path in college, unfortunately. I always missed it though, because when you go to college, you have to be all in. You don't get to play anymore. And my daughters also went theater, my oldest, and her senior year of high school in LaPorte, they performed The Wiz. Okay. there were only 3 Black people in the cast that we're not going to talk about.
No, we're not. I will tell you, we will not get off on this. There is a strong movement in the national and global theater community to fix that. And it is, I have real hope that this time around, maybe we'll get there. But let's go back to Hamlet for a minute, the play, not the character. So in the play of Hamlet, he has been in love with, and the love has been reciprocated with, a young woman named Ophelia. She is a little bit below his station, meaning he's a prince. She is not a princess, but she is part of the palace.
How you spell her name?
It's Ophelia. And she is, it's funny, I've had the joy of playing her twice. The first time I played her, I was younger and very naive, and I didn't give her much depth. The second time, I was able to go much deeper, but I think there's a whole, we could do a whole talk just about Ophelia. Don't worry, I won't. But Ophelia is heartbroken because her father who works for the king, does not want her to be in love with Hamlet because it's never going to work out. So he tells her she has to return all the love letters that Hamlet has given to her, and that, of course, breaks Hamlet's heart. So that's another piece of the puzzle that I didn't go into before, To Be or Not to Be, is that his heartache is not just about his mother and his father, but about this young woman that he loves. And so in this moment, Ophelia has attempted to, what we would call, break up with Hamlet by returning his love letters. He has then later come to see her in her room, and his behavior really freaked her out, and she's genuinely scared. But what I love is that she's not just scared for herself, she's much more scared for him. And this is, I just want to read you a short little bit of how she describes Hamlet to her father. So this is how she is perceiving him in his madness, or his depression, or his grief, or whatever you want to call it. But in the world of the play, everyone is talking about he's got to be crazy, again, in the stigma sense of the word. And yet she loves him so much, she can see beyond that he is breaking inside, and she is deeply saddened by that. So she runs into her father, and she's concerned, and he's concerned for his daughter, and she describes what happened. She says, "He took me by the wrist and held me hard. Then goes he to the length of all his arm, and with his other hand thus o'er his brow, he falls to such perusal of my face as he would draw it. Long stayed he so. At last, a little shaking of mine arm, then thrice his head thus waving up and down, he raised a sigh, so piteous and profound, as it did seem to shatter all his bulk and end his being. That done, he lets me go. And with his head over his shoulder turned, he seemed to make his way without his eyes. For out of doors he went without their help, and to the last bended their light on me." So she has just been confronted by the man that she loves, that
You're good.
that she's been told she has to break things off with, and he is clearly so troubled. He doesn't speak a word to her when he comes to see her. Everything he conveys to her, he does so physically and emotionally and through his eyes. And I am always moved by the line that he raised a sigh. So he sighed in a way that was so sad that it was like his life was ending. That's how it felt to her. And she is so worried about him. And then he does this thing where he basically, it's not that he walks backwards out of the room. He walks with his head over his shoulder, just looking at her, managing not to bump into the door. but he does not take his eyes off of her until he's out of the room, and she is shaken. And I just find this is just a handful of lines, and it's not one you'll find listed in the great monologues of Shakespeare, but I think it is, because what we come to see is that she is so grief-stricken by what has happened to this man that she loves, and by the fact that she can't reciprocate his love, is that she goes through her own depression and then does ultimately commit suicide, enact suicide.
Right.
She drowns herself, and the queen finds her. And I remember back in college when I was studying this, and I wrote a paper that even though physically she died of drowning, I believe that she died of a broken heart. I believe that her deep sadness is
Very insightful.
Yeah, it was hugely influential. And so I think it's kind of fascinating. I haven't thought about this quite like this before now, but and you can tell I'm a total Shakespeare nerd. I'm just nerd out. I'll own it. But
I love it.
but that, you know, To Be or Not to Be is the one we know, and rightly so. It is an extraordinary piece of writing. But it is not, in the end, Hamlet's character, though he does die. He does not enact suicide, but it is Ophelia's character who does. So Hamlet is, I mean, if ever you wanted to explore mental health in Shakespeare, Hamlet gives us, the play Hamlet gives us so many sides of it. And then there's a really wonderful scene that's actually quite funny, believe it or not, where Hamlet is outright pretending to be crazy and fooling Ophelia's father. But it's just wild to me how many different ways Shakespeare managed to approach the notion of mental health in one play. And I will put in the chat, there's actually a ton of free Shakespeare online. You can go in and read whole scripts, but I will put To Be or Not to Be and Ophelia's monologue here for you if you want to reference the language. So anyway, I wonder if sort of how that strikes you. I mean, here we are talking about language that is over 400 years old, that has often been done primarily by white people. Back in its day, it was only performed by men because, of course, women weren't allowed to act back in the day. So even the women characters were played by men. But it has opened up and opened up and opened up over the years to include more and more people of all races, colors, creeds, genders. And I think it is a testament to the humanity of Shakespeare that we're still doing his plays this many years later. Kren, you were mentioning Denzel Washington. There is a fabulous, if you'd like a happy Shakespeare to dive into during COVID tide, see if you can find, I'll put it in the chat, Kenneth Branagh, who's a brilliant British actor, did a version of one of Shakespeare's comedies called Much Ado About Nothing, and Denzel Washington is in it, and he's just fantastic. So I'll put that in the chat. It's a great film. So yes, so that is what I offer. There's another play that John and I were going to do a short scene from.
I think Shannon.
Yeah.
What did I was wondering about our audience here. What do they take from Ophelia? I mean, are there not to be too parallel, but are there Ophelia moments out there? Are there Ophelia moments where she is bound in so many directions contrary to her spirit that I was wondering what people thought about Ophelia as a discussion.
I think she's human. So she has a heart. She feels bad. But yeah, she feels bad. I could relate to her because she's like caught in the middle. I feel like she's caught in the middle.
She is very much, you're absolutely right.
And that's how I felt with my situation. I was, because I'm like taking lives because it happened many years ago, but I'm bringing it to light, and now they're living their life. But now, so it's like you definitely have a heart, but you know what is best for you. She know what's best for her, but she still has a heart. That's how I took it.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. She is very much caught. Nat, you wanted to say something?
I'd like to say yes, because that passage was about a love that she couldn't return. It was a love with a man. But that's kind of where I am with my family right now. I've recognized who I am. And I recognize, I think, the major cause of my mental illness. I mean, I'm just going to say it, and I apologize if it offends anybody. But I realized that I was convicted by the Holy Ghost when I was born. You read John chapter 15, I think it's 26 through 16 and 11. That's me. I have a strong sense of right and wrong, and it's hindered me from acclimating, I guess, to common society.
No.
I don't lie, cheat, and steal. I don't lie, cheat, and steal. So when I was working in corporate America, at some point, someone always asked me to. And when I said no, it caused problems for me. That's why I say that. But
So
my family is a love that I feel like right now I can't be a part of it. And it hurts me. I feel like Ophelia, but towards my family, not a dude. Because I can't be around what they're doing right now. It makes me feel bad. It's a lot of why I felt bad for so long. And it's one of those ties I had to break so that I didn't continue to feel like Ophelia. That's it.
I appreciate that. Neal, were you going to say something?
I'm listening, and I'm, you know, there is isn't there in Romeo and Juliet where they talk about that you're just too fine for the world. There's something like that, right?
There's at the end of Juliet's, my favorite monologues of Juliet's.
Yeah.
She has this wonderful. Juliet is as many people know, is a teenager. A lot of people are much more familiar with Romeo and Juliet, but if you're not, they are a pair of young teenagers, head over heels at first sight, from families that are warring, or that are fighting, that are from different, that are sworn enemies of each other, but they are so bound by their love, they're determined to try to find a way. And in all of her youthful frenzy, Juliet has this beautiful line when she realizes that one day this young man she loves will die, and she says, "And when he shall die, take him and cut him out in little stars, and he will make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with night and pay no worship to the garish sun." That when he dies, she can imagine that he will go be amongst the stars, and people will love it so much they'll forget about daytime and just want to spend their time in night seeing this glorious sky that is to her Romeo.
Yeah. See, I was
that.
thinking that with Ophelia, that the importance of love and the separation from it is that's Ophelia's moment. Shakespeare, Hamlet has his moment, but the separation. And I noticed that in our community, that suicide is the number 2 cause of death between ages now 6 and 24. Now, what that means is that there must be a lot of people who are having these thoughts. There must be a lot of people that are having these moments of separation, or these moments of, and that if we know that about youth, or if we know that about all of us, then what does that impel us to do? What, these are things that we identify with, but they're also letting us know that there are people out there who are feeling this way. And there are a lot of people out there feeling this way. So what can we do, is kind of where I'm, it's a thing that I'm thinking about, which is, yes, I can identify with these characters. They're part of my story, these things, and as we become aware of this in this Tuesday talk, then how does it help us set our radar, or how does us talk to people about the fact that these thoughts are out there, and how do we do the caring work and the real work of, like, who talked to Ophelia and who talked to Hamlet in a way that made them change their minds? Who do you know that, Shannon?
They had no one.
Well, they committed suicide, so apparently she didn't talk to anyone.
Ophelia did.
And
she had literally no one to talk to. Hamlet does have a best friend, Horatio, who kind of helps ground him, but in the end, it's his own inner resolve. And of course, I'm not 100% sure, but of course, suicide would have been, for a lot of, and sadly in some places still, committing suicide in some religions means you're going to hell. And
right.
So for Ophelia, I'm not sure she got a proper burial because of that in that time. But the whole point is that here are these two young people who, and of course it was a different time and a different place, but they had no one to talk to. And they, and at a certain level, it becomes literally a matter of life or death if you say certain things about certain people. So I love what you're saying about the notion of being aware of love and the possibility of it, but being separated from it and not feeling like you can find a way to connect with that love. And so how do we, I would say that one of the ways we try to do the caring work is by sharing our stories, is by being open, by letting other people know that what they're feeling is not, while we don't presume to know their exact story, we want them to know that there is no shame in it, and that a lot of us have felt that too. Mm-hmm. And as we continue to work to reduce the stigma, I think creating spaces is the other thing, creating spaces like this and our support groups and our classes, and even just friend to friend, showing up for people and creating that space where people feel safe enough.
Isn't there, in there in the play, isn't there these two observers?
Yes.
Yes. They don't interact at all, really. They just observe.
Well, what
And
happens, you're thinking of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. So these are
right, yeah,
these are two buddies of Hamlet's from college. And
right.
so Hamlet's mother is named Gertrude, she's the queen. She's very concerned about her son. She knows something is wrong and that it's beyond just the grief for his father. He won't tell her what's going on. So she asks these two friends of his from college, they weren't super close friends, but she seems to remember them, if they would come over to the kingdom in Denmark and see if they can figure out what's going on with Hamlet. Unfortunately, they're not close friends of his, and they don't know how to connect with him genuinely. And as a result of that, Hamlet sees right through it and says, I know why you're here. You were paid to come here to try to figure out what's wrong with me. Guess what? It's not going to work. And that's the end of that. So yes, those are the two that you were thinking of. And so
Okay.
to that end, that authenticity has to be there. Otherwise, someone who's in, I mean, you got to.
Can I say something really wild?
Yes.
About
Always.
is the clinical psychologist there to make money, or are they there to are they authentically to be with you? It's one of the challenges of sharing your story in a professional means that we all go through. We seek a relationship, but I don't know, that was one about, like, I was thinking about this, and I know time's running out, but I was thinking about, like, we can identify with Hamlet to an extent, we can identify with Ophelia to an extent, and we can look around and see if we identify with authentically showing up, and not being the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern observers, because they see the signs the same as everybody does. They see the signs of turmoil, and I think that's one of the things that we're called to do, is to see the signs and watch our language, because much of the time in Hamlet, he's stigmatized for being in distress.
Yes. There is something wrong with him.
And that's a real education for all of us about that in seeing distress, we have a tendency to say, knock it off. Or we have a tendency to minimize it, or we have a tendency to say they're drama queens and kings.
And that's exactly what his mother and
Right.
stepfather / uncle do, is say, you're being sad about your dad too long.
Yeah. Or
Yes.
Or you just say, get over it. And
Yeah.
You're being overly dramatic.
I hope that we've stimulated some, and thank you, Shannon. Thank you very, very much for
Can I just say
helping
something
us.
about,
What?
I'd like to speak on a mixed message. I'd like to speak on a mixed message that I received growing up, because in the Black community growing up, for me, mental illness does not exist. It's a illness that Black people can't afford to have. That's what I was told. So at one point, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. But yet I'm introduced as, this is my crazy sister. This is my crazy aunt. But there's nothing wrong with me.
Yeah. You just summed it all up beautifully. Well, I think that's actually quite a perfect note for us to end on. And so we need that's all the more reason that we all need to stay together, to speak up and speak out, and to be authentically there for each other. So I thank you all so very much for joining us today. This has been personally very meaningful to me, and I really appreciate you taking the time. We are very, very glad you're here, and NAMI is always here for you if you need us. So thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday, and we'll see you back next week and Tuesday at noon once again. Bye, everybody.
Yay. Bye.
Thank you.